Welcome, everyone, to Tech in 20, starting fiscal year 2014. Today, we're going to talk about gamification. We're glad everybody's here, and appreciate you taking just a little bit of time and filling in the poll. It appears as though we've got some additional answers from this morning. And as we talk about this idea of what was the first gamification out there that we saw, and green stamps, frequent flyer, or Pong. The idea of gamification is one where we're using a game-style process to engage our customers and do that. And so if you'll vote either by text at 22333 or online at pollev.com/tech20, and you can do that on an iPhone, an iPad, an Android, or a browser, and any kind of a machine. And so we appreciate you taking a little bit of time and voting in this. And as you can see, it's kind of an easy guess anyway, even if you don't know what green stamps are. Green stamps came out in the 50s, and they were used by a company named S&H, and companies used those green stamps to, when you buy things at the grocery store, for every $1 or $5 or $10 that you'd spend, they'd give you some green stamps, and you take them home and paste them in a little book and take them back and get money or get prizes for that. And so it was really the first time that anybody used that. And so it's been amazing to see it over the years. A frequent flyer program is very much a gamification. It's designed to build loyalty and designed to keep people buying and using a specific airline or a travel partner so that they can go get more money, and they give them something in return. In this case, in frequent flyers, it's airline seats that you can probably never redeem, but that's beside the point. And of course, Pong was one of the first video games out there, and it's been a great one, and it's making a comeback even. But the idea of gamification is really this idea of building customer loyalty by creating this game sense, using game theories and mechanics to be able to go in and build customer loyalty and an engagement. And so as we think about this, it's important to understand a little bit more about what we do and how it works and how this might work for you too. And so as we think about this, then, you know, it really comes down to companies using game-style mechanics and technologies in non-game environments. And they do it to get better engagement from the customers. And, you know, really, they give you something, and hopefully it's of some value to you, whether it's points or whatever. They give you something, and in return, they're expecting loyalty from you. But I think this is really interesting as we look at this and say, okay, what is your game style? And I think the reason this is important is because as we think about our pre-sales people here at CA, those pre-sales people to a great degree are similar to their customers and similar to other people in the environment or in the marketplace. And so we can go and look at that and say, okay, what characteristics do we see in this? And so, for example, if your favorite kind of thing is SimCity, it might be that it's the thinking man's game. You try and think 7 steps ahead. It's a chess, but electronic, and you're trying to figure out how you can solve this problem. On the other hand, a Pac-Man could be just action, 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 fairly easy mechanics to go through, but it's always going in and there's always something going on. A first-person shooter, on the other hand, is really a different game style than either of those two. And the first-person shooter kind of a game has so much information and so much input coming in at any given time that it really requires an engagement, but it also requires a deep thought process, almost to the point of ignoring everything else. And so if we look at this and we say, okay, if we're looking at making game technologies into our products or our customers' products, and we're going to see this more in the future, then every company has to figure out, okay, what kind of game style should it be? Is our game style a SimCity game style? Or is it a Pac-Man, a simple one but easily done, but it's just kind of addicting because it's so much fun to do? Or is it a first-person shooter where we've got so much information flying at the individual that they have to be deeply engaged? And so I think it's kind of an interesting thing. And as you think about that, go ahead and vote on that and see where you sit in this idea, okay? As we look at it, then the mechanics of this really are that you've got things like points or badges, levels that you attain, and you can see leaderboards, and you can start to rank yourself against other people, but there's specific challenges that you can overcome, and they have to be winnable challenges, by the way, at some point. I mean, they may be so hard that it's really frustrating and you keep trying and trying and trying. And I think one of the excellent visual examples of this is Angry Birds. I know that, you know, you go in and you can start at the first level, and then you can go in and they're quite simple, and you just knock down the structures and get the points, but then you try to get more points. It's got the high score, and then you can get 1, 2, or 3 stars, and you can go and achieve, and you know, at some point in time, it becomes so difficult that it's very challenging to get a good enough score to get those 3 stars so you can move to the next level. It's addicting, and it's been addicting, and it's been very, very popular, even though it is a very simple idea. But where this translates into gamification, as we're talking about it, is that it's an excellent example of how it uses all of these processes, the points, the badges, the levels, leaderboards, and challenges, and to be able to go in and do this. Now, as you think about it, then you go in and say, how can we do this in another process? And again, if we go back to frequent flyer miles, there's the silver medallion and the gold medallion and the diamond and the platinum and blah, 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 blah. And you're supposed to get more and more and more and more things from the airline companies because you get these more and more and more miles. I know people who actually go, and at the end of the year, they may have to take an extra flight or two just to go in and keep their status on this one airline for the next year. And, you know, we do crazy things because we want points and badges, levels, and so on. And people expect it of us. We are sucked into this whole process because of the quality of the gaming or the gamification of these products. And so as we think about that, then you go in and say, okay, how do we look at this? How is gamification different than the real world? And we start looking at what's required in order to be able to do effective gamification. And the first one of those is an accelerated feedback cycle. I know most of us have been through performance reviews, and if you're like me, you went into performance reviews and you looked at some of the goals you set last year and you go, wow, did I set that goal? Really? And all of a sudden you have to think back, and did I achieve that goal? And so the time between when you have the goal and when you report on the goal, that feedback cycle is quite long. In a gaming world, it's immediate, and you increase that velocity of that feedback loop, and so that you can find out very, very quickly. If you make a mistake, you start over again. Make a mistake, start over again. You achieve but don't achieve as much as you want, you start over again. And so you get that feedback cycle going, and it feeds on itself, and that creates that engagement. The second one, the clear goals and rules. I mean, sometimes we run into situations where we don't have a really strong set of expectations of what we're supposed to do at any given time. We have a broad goal and a broad code of conduct and a broad set of what our jobs are, but we don't necessarily always have do this, 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 and if I do those 5 things, it's going to work. And so in the gaming kind of an environment, then you have clear goals and you have very, very specific things that you have to do. And that creates this empowerment. People going and saying, I can do this. I'm going to go forward and do this. And there's some real interesting things associated with it that we'll talk about in a few minutes as far as bringing this more into what we do. The third one, in my opinion, is the most difficult, the compelling narrative. We've all seen games that have stories that are just terrible, and other games, stories that just fall flat, and other games that are so engaging that you might as well call in for work because you're going to stay up all night and all day and all night over again, and you're going to play this game until you master this game if it takes 2 weeks and you've blown all your vacation time. So sometimes we see those, but the challenge is if we're going to do this in a non-game environment, if we're going to do the gaming process in a non-game environment, we have to create compelling narratives. We have to have stories. We have to have things that we can talk about that people will relate to and that people will be able to go in and use effectively. And that, coming up with those stories, is just as hard in business as it is in the movies, as it is in books and videos and so on. I mean, how many news stories do we have? Not that many, as far as in movies, for example. And so we need to go in and be able to create compelling stories, stories that really draw people in. So it isn't just what they're getting in response to this, but that they have something that they can really relate to. And that leads us to the last one, the tasks that are challenging. And the key to this is winning. And the idea of winning is critical for this. If you have challenges that are not winnable, then there's no real way to be able to ensure that people are going to play. Eventually, they're going to give up. You need to have them challenging and sometimes complex and building in complexity over time, but being able to be achieved so people can achieve what we expect them to do. And so that's a real significant issue associated with it. But in the industry that we're in the software industry and in the enterprise in general, more than 50% of the organizations for innovation processes are going to use gamification by 2015. And that means that we're going to see this more and more and more, and we're going to see good examples and not so good examples. But what they're trying to do is retain customers and create mind share as well as market share. You look at Facebook and the whole concept of likes. I have friends who it feels like their whole thing is to see how many likes or how many friends they can get. I have 700 friends, or I have 1,700 friends. And they brag about how many friends they have, which, of course, nobody can communicate with them all, so it's kind of silly. But as we go through and look at that, you know, eBay, the whole concept of eBay is winning. And winning this, and the ad series that they did in 2007 of Shop Victoriously, the whole thing is winning, and it's better if you win it. And so as we do this, we're going to see this. And if 70% of the global 2,000 organizations will have at least one gamified application, that's our customers. They're going to be doing this. That's who we target with all of our work. And so if we're familiar with what they're doing and we can help them through our processes, then that makes it, or can make, a significant difference. And so as we think about this, then we can go in and do it. So we'd like to get some of your feedback and what you think about this. I want to talk about a couple of things here. And number one, will it play in the enterprise, this idea of the Apple effect? And that's really the consumerization of everything, going from a BlackBerry to an Apple iPhone, for example, and wanting more personalized and more fun kinds of things. Is that going to affect the enterprise, and is that going to be significant as part of the change as we see our marketplaces change. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about, and I'd like your opinion on that. And the second one is that we make this assumption that and anybody makes this assumption if they're going to do gamification, that if people are more familiar with our products and more familiar with our interfaces, will they buy more? And so if we think about that idea and use that in the process of all of this, I think it's significant to think about. And then the third one is that today's users are less technical. We're hearing that all over the place. They are less technical than they were a few years ago. That doesn't mean they need less information, but they need it fed to them in a little bit different way so that they can take advantage of it. Some of the things that are really interesting as we think about this, a couple of things. One is there was a flash game called Philo, and it went and they got people, because it was interesting, they got 350,000 people to supply DNA for research. And you think about that and doing that. You think about things such as our dev processes. And so, you know, we think of dev and going through that and this whole agile process where it's a short thing, we get the customers involved, and then we come back with them and show them how we added what they did. It's a sort of a gamification kind of an idea where we can get them involved. And so I'd be interested to see if you have any other thoughts about this and what you think about this process. A couple of other comments that were there. This top one, it's all about business-related application or something like gamification. If we can go in and enhance our position in the market, drive our customer loyalty, or in some other way make a positive impact, that's where it's really going to happen. And I think one more thing that's very interesting for you to consider is that today, often in terms of products in the marketplace, ours and others, when we look at those, we don't have the same kind of pace of information that we have when we're looking at something like a first-person shooter. If you think, and not to say our games or our products should look like first-person shooter games, but the idea that with a first-person shooter, the user has a lot of information all at their fingertips. They're deeply engaged. They're able to manage and manipulate that information and use different kinds of things. And could we, for example, use something like that with when we're starting to look at monitoring, whether it's a system monitoring or application or security or something like that? The idea is that we have a lot of different kinds of opportunities associated with it to change how we think about it and change how we look at this in terms of innovation. So let's go ahead and open it up for questions. And so if you have any questions, hit #1 for questions, and we'll take just a minute to do that. I've got a question that came in on chat, and so I want to take care of that question first. And that question was, do we see this as a trend in enterprise software as well as consumer software? And I would have to say yes. I think we're going to see this as a significant trend. And I think that people are there trying to get more and more engagement and more interest. And one of the things that other reason I believe it is we look at how the big players in the market, CA included, as we go in and we have, solutions that target a lot of different areas. We want to capture all of their business. We want to take all of their business as much as possible, and then, you know, we want them all to work together. We want a seamless interface, But the idea is that we want all of their engagement and all of their interest. Well, if we can do that with individual products in our solutions, that will help it as well. And some of the upstart companies are really pushing towards that environment. So I think it's going to happen in the enterprise as well as consumerization. So, Ashley, do we have any other questions on the line?
And, sir, I do apologize, but that is *1 on the telephone keypad to ask a question. That's okay, no problem. We'll give it just a few moments to queue.
Okay.
And, sir, I'm not showing any audio questions at this time.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they pressed *1 or not.
Okay. So, anyway, thank you very much for everything. We appreciate you being here and taking the time to do this. Look forward to talking with you more about this in the future. If you have any comments or questions, just contact me at clayton.johnson@ca.com. And until then, until we see you next week, good selling.